No one had ever seen the most feared mafia boss in Chicago shed a tear until that 3-year-old girl asked him a question that the entire underworld never dared to ask. But before that moment arrived, Dominic Blackwood was still the stone, cold, ruthless, untouchable. That Tuesday morning, Dominic's eyes snapped open at exactly 4 a.m., not because of an alarm, not because of any sound. His body simply refused to let him sleep any longer, because sleeping meant dreaming, and dreaming meant seeing Isabella. He lay still for a moment, staring at the ceiling of his bedroom. The silk sheets worth thousands of dollars felt like ice against his skin. The mattress, custom-made from Italy, offered no comfort. Nothing in this mansion offered comfort. Dominic sat up slowly, his bare feet touching the cold marble floor. The room was enormous, bigger than most apartments in Chicago. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling. Antique furniture lined the walls. A painting worth more than what most people earned in a lifetime hung above the fireplace. But the room felt like a tomb. He walked to the window and looked out at the city below. Chicago stretched endlessly into the darkness, millions of lights flickering like distant stars. Somewhere out there, people were sleeping peacefully. Somewhere out there, people were dreaming without fear. Dominic couldn't remember the last time he had a peaceful dream. He turned away from the window, and his eyes landed on the safe in the corner of his bedroom. Small, black, unassuming, but it held everything he couldn't face. His feet carried him toward it without permission. His hand reached out, fingers brushing against the cold metal surface. He stood there for what felt like an eternity. Then he pulled his hand back and walked away. Not today. Not ever. By 5 a.m., Dominic was dressed and heading downstairs. His footsteps echoed through the empty hallways of the Blackwood mansion. 23 rooms, 15 bathrooms, a staff of 12. And yet, the silence here was absolute. In the kitchen, a maid was preparing his coffee. The moment she heard his footsteps, she froze. Her eyes dropped to the floor. Her hands trembled slightly as she placed the cup on the counter. "Your coffee, Mr. Blackwood," she whispered, stepping back immediately. Dominic didn't respond. He picked up the cup, took one sip, and walked past her as if she didn't exist. The maid exhaled only after he was gone. This was the rule in the Blackwood mansion. Walk softly, speak quietly, never look him in the eyes, never ask questions. And above all, never, ever mention her name. Isabella. The staff had learned this the hard way. 6 years ago, a new gardener had made the mistake of asking about the young woman in the photograph on Dominic's desk. He was gone by noon that same day. No one ever saw him again. No one asked questions after that. In the dining room, Marcus, the butler who had served the Blackwood family for over 20 years, stood waiting with the morning newspaper. "Good morning, sir," Marcus said, his voice calm and measured. Dominic sat down without responding. He unfolded the newspaper but didn't read it. His eyes stared at the words without seeing them. Marcus watched him for a moment. He was the only person in this mansion who dared to truly look at Dominic. The only one who remembered the man Dominic used to be before the darkness consumed him. "Will you be going to the office today, sir?" Marcus asked. "Yes, the car will be ready in 30 minutes. Dominic nodded slightly. The conversation was over. As Marcus turned to leave, he glanced back at his employer. Dominic sat alone at the enormous dining table, surrounded by wealth that most people could only dream of, but his eyes were empty. His face was carved from stone. Dominic Blackwood was 37 years old. He controlled half of Chicago's underworld. He had killed men without blinking. He had built an empire on fear and blood, but there was one thing he could never kill: memory. And every single day, that memory was slowly killing him instead. The black Mercedes cut through Chicago's morning traffic like a knife through flesh. Dominic sat in the back seat, his eyes fixed on nothing, his mind somewhere far away. The driver knew better than to speak. The 2 bodyguards in the front seats kept their eyes forward. Silence was the language of the Blackwood organization. 20 minutes later, the car pulled up to a building in the heart of downtown. From the outside, it looked like any other luxury nightclub: velvet ropes, neon signs, tinted windows. The sign above the door read Eclipse, but everyone in Chicago knew what Eclipse really was: the headquarters of the Blackwood Empire. Dominic stepped out of the car and walked toward the entrance. The bouncer, a massive man with scars across his face, immediately stepped aside and bowed his head. "Mr. Blackwood." Dominic didn't acknowledge him. He simply walked through the doors and into the darkness beyond. Inside, Eclipse was empty at this hour. The dance floors were silent, the bars were unmanned, but in the back, behind a door that required 3 separate keys to open, a different world existed. The conference room was already full when Dominic entered. 8 men sat around a long mahogany table. These were the underbosses, the lieutenants who controlled different territories across Chicago: drug operations, weapons trafficking, money laundering, protection rackets. The moment Dominic appeared, every man rose to his feet. "Boss," they said in unison, heads bowed. Dominic walked to the head of the table and sat down. Only then did the others take their seats. No one spoke. No one moved. They waited. "Report," Dominic said. 1 word. That was all he needed. For the next hour, each underboss gave his update. Numbers, problems, solutions. Dominic listened without expression, his fingers occasionally tapping against the silver ring on his right hand. The ring never left his finger, ever. When the last report finished, Dominic's eyes moved slowly around the table. They stopped on a man sitting at the far end, Tony Russo, in charge of the Southside operations. "Tony," Dominic said quietly. Tony's face went pale. "Yes, boss? I heard we lost a shipment last week. $50,000 worth of merchandise, intercepted by the Morano family. Boss, I can explain. I also heard," Dominic continued, his voice never rising, "that you were seen at a casino that night, instead of overseeing the delivery yourself." The room went completely still. Tony opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. His hands were shaking. Dominic didn't yell. He didn't threaten. He simply looked at Tony with those empty, cold eyes. And somehow, that was worse than any threat. "You have 1 week to recover the loss," Dominic said finally. "From your own pocket. If you fail, we'll have a different conversation." Tony nodded frantically. "Yes, boss. Thank you, boss. I won't disappoint you." Dominic stood up. The meeting was over. As he walked out, the underbosses exhaled collectively. They had survived another meeting with the Stone. In the car heading back to the mansion, Marcus sat in the passenger seat. The old butler had accompanied Dominic to every meeting for the past 15 years. "Sir," Marcus said quietly, "do you know what day it is today?" Dominic's hand froze on the silver ring. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. He knew. Of course he knew. 6 years ago today, Isabella had died. His little sister, the only person he had ever truly loved, the only light in his dark world, gone. Because of him, because of this life, because he couldn't protect her. "I know," Dominic said, his voice barely above a whisper. Marcus nodded and said nothing more. He had served this family long enough to understand when words were useless. Dominic turned his gaze to the window, watching Chicago blur past. His thumb rubbed absently against the silver ring, Isabella's ring. She had given it to him on his 25th birthday. "So you'll always remember me," she had said, laughing, as if he could ever forget. Dominic Blackwood controlled an empire. He commanded fear. He held power that most men could only dream of, but he would trade it all, every dollar, every territory, every ounce of power for 1 more day with her, 1 more hour, 1 more moment. But the dead don't come back, and the living are left to carry the weight of what remains. The Mercedes had barely pulled into the mansion's driveway when Dominic noticed the silver Bentley parked near the entrance. His jaw tightened. Vincent was here. Marcus glanced at the car and then at Dominic. "Should I tell him you're unavailable, sir?" "No." Dominic stepped out of the Mercedes. "I'll handle it." Inside the mansion, Vincent Blackwood stood in the main parlor, examining a painting on the wall. He was 52 years old, silver-haired, impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit that cost more than most people's annual salary. His posture was relaxed. His smile was warm, but his eyes were always calculating. "Dominic," Vincent said, turning around with open arms. "There you are. I was beginning to worry." Dominic didn't embrace him. He simply walked past and poured himself a glass of whiskey from the cabinet. "You should have called before coming," Dominic said flatly. "Since when does family need an appointment?" Vincent laughed softly, settling into one of the leather armchairs. "I was in the neighborhood, thought I'd check on my favorite nephew. I'm your only nephew, which makes you even more precious to me." Dominic didn't respond. He stood by the window, whiskey in hand, his back to Vincent. The silence stretched between them. Vincent was Dominic's father's younger brother. After Dominic's parents died in a car accident 20 years ago, Vincent had stepped in. He had helped Dominic build the organization from the ground up. He had been there through every war, every betrayal, every victory, but Dominic had never fully trusted him. There was something behind Vincent's smile, something that Dominic could never quite identify. "I heard about the meeting this morning," Vincent said casually. "Tony Russo made quite a mess, didn't he?" "It's handled." "Of course it is. You always handle things." Vincent paused, crossing his legs. "But I have to say, Dominic, you look tired. More tired than usual. Dominic turned slightly. I'm fine. Are you? Vincent leaned forward, his voice softening with concern. You know what day it is today, don't you? The question hung in the air like poison. Dominic's grip on the whiskey glass tightened. Don't. I'm not trying to upset you, Vincent continued gently. I'm just worried. 6 years, Dominic. 6 years since Isabella. And you still haven't moved on. There's nothing to move on from. That's exactly what worries me. Vincent stood up and walked closer. You need rest. You need to take care of yourself. Remember what happened after she died? You couldn't function for months. You couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, couldn't run the organization. Dominic said nothing. His jaw was clenched so tight it could have cracked stone. I stepped in back then, Vincent continued. I kept everything running while you recovered. I protected you, protected our family's legacy. He placed a hand on Dominic's shoulder. I would do it again in a heartbeat. You know that, right? Dominic finally turned to face his uncle. Their eyes met. What do you want, Vincent? The warmth in Vincent's expression flickered just for a moment. Then it returned. I want you to be well, Vincent said smoothly. That's all I've ever wanted. You're like a son to me, Dominic. Everything I do for you. The words sounded right. The tone sounded sincere. But something felt wrong. Something always felt wrong with Vincent. I appreciate your concern, Dominic said coldly, but I don't need it. Vincent smiled and stepped back. Of course. You're strong. You always have been. He picked up his coat from the armchair. I should go, but please take care of yourself. The organization needs you. I need you. He walked toward the door, then paused. Oh, and Dominic? Vincent glanced back over his shoulder. If you ever need me to step in again for any reason, you know I'm always here. He left without waiting for a response. Dominic stood alone in the parlor, the whiskey untouched in his hand. His eyes were fixed on the door where Vincent had disappeared. Outside, Vincent climbed into his Bentley. His driver started the engine, but Vincent didn't give the order to leave immediately. Instead, he sat in the back seat, staring at the mansion through the tinted window. The warm smile was gone now. In its place was something colder, sharper, patient. Soon, Vincent murmured to himself. Then he signaled the driver, and the Bentley pulled away into the Chicago afternoon. On the other side of Chicago, in a world that couldn't be more different, Elena Reyes opened her eyes at exactly 4:30 in the morning. No alarm clock. Her body simply knew. She lay still for a moment, listening to the soft breathing of her daughter beside her. Lily was curled up in a ball, clutching her worn teddy bear Mr. Honey against her chest. Her tiny lips were slightly parted. Her dark curls spread across the pillow like a halo. Elena watched her daughter sleep and felt her heart swell with a love so fierce it almost hurt. This was why she got up every morning. This was why she worked 2 jobs. This was why she never stopped fighting. Carefully, Elena slipped out of bed without waking Lily. The apartment was small, just 1 bedroom, a cramped kitchen, and a bathroom with a shower that only worked half the time. The walls were thin, the pipes rattled, the heating was unreliable, but it was theirs, and the rent was paid. For now. Elena moved quietly through her morning routine. She heated milk for Lily's bottle. She packed the diaper bag with extra clothes, snacks, and Lily's favorite coloring book. She laid out a small dress for her daughter to wear later. Every movement was practiced, efficient, the choreography of a single mother who had no room for error. As she worked, her mind drifted back as it sometimes did to the day everything changed. She had been 19, young, naive, desperately in love with a man who promised her the world. When she told him she was pregnant, he had smiled and said all the right things. Then he disappeared. No phone call, no explanation, just gone. Elena had tried to reach her family in Mexico, but they had their own struggles. Her mother was sick. Her father worked 3 jobs just to keep food on the table. They couldn't help. They could barely survive themselves. So Elena did what she had always done. She survived alone. At 5:15, Elena gently woke Lily. The little girl rubbed her eyes and reached up with both arms. Mommy. Good morning, mi amor. Elena lifted her daughter and held her close. Time to go see Aunt Rosa. Lily yawned and snuggled against Elena's neck. Mr. Honey squeezed between them. 10 minutes later, Elena knocked on the door across the hall. Rosa Martinez, a kind widow in her late 50s, opened it with a warm smile. There's my favorite girl, Rosa said, reaching for Lily. Come here, pequeña. Lily went willingly into Rosa's arms, already half asleep again. Elena handed over the diaper bag. Everything's inside. Her milk, Her snacks, extra diapers, Elena. Rosa laughed softly. I've done this 100 times. I know. Elena smiled tiredly. I know. I just worry. Rosa's expression softened. She shifted Lily to one hip and looked at Elena carefully. She's growing so fast, Rosa said quietly. Every week, I see changes. She needs more. Elena, better food, better clothes, a real home with space to run. I know. Elena's voice was barely a whisper. You need a better job, mija. Something that pays more. I'm trying, Rosa. Elena straightened her uniform, the simple blue dress required for her work. Actually, I found something. A new position, at a mansion in the Gold Coast. The Blackwood estate. Rosa's face changed. The warmth faded. Something like fear flickered in her eyes. Blackwood? Rosa repeated. Elena, people talk about that family. They say the man who lives there, the owner, he's dangerous. Very dangerous. I know what they say. Then why would you work there? Elena looked at Lily, now dozing peacefully in Rosa's arms. Her daughter's tiny fingers were wrapped around Mr. Honey's ear. Because they pay double, Elena said firmly. Double what I make now, Rosa. That's enough for a better apartment, better food, maybe even preschool next year. But if the man is dangerous, I don't need him to like me. Elena's jaw tightened with determination. I don't need him to notice me. I just need the money. For her, Rosa sighed heavily. She had known Elena for 3 years, long enough to recognize when arguing was pointless. Just be careful, Mija. Promise me. Elena leaned forward and kissed Lily's forehead. I promise. Then she turned and walked down the hallway, toward the stairs, toward the train station, toward a world she couldn't possibly imagine. Elena had seen beautiful homes before, in magazines, on television, in the dreams she used to have as a little girl in Mexico, imagining a life far away from poverty. But nothing had prepared her for the Blackwood mansion. The iron gates alone were taller than her entire apartment building. They opened automatically as the staff shuttle van approached, revealing a driveway that seemed to stretch forever. Perfectly trimmed hedges lined both sides. Marble statues stood like silent guardians. Fountains sprayed crystal-clear water into the morning air. And then the house itself. No, not a house. A palace. 3 stories of gray stone and dark windows. Columns framing the entrance like something from ancient Rome. A door so massive it could have belonged to a cathedral. Elena's heart pounded against her ribs. What am I doing here? The van stopped near the service entrance at the side of the mansion. Elena climbed out on shaky legs, clutching her small bag against her chest. 2 other workers exited behind her, a cook and a groundskeeper, but they quickly disappeared through separate doors without a word. Elena stood alone. Miss Reyes? She turned. A man stood in the doorway, tall, silver-haired, dressed in a perfectly pressed black suit. His posture was straight. His expression was neutral. But his eyes were kind. I'm Marcus, he said calmly, head butler of the Blackwood estate. Please, follow me. Elena nodded and stepped inside. The interior was even more overwhelming than the exterior. Marble floors, crystal chandeliers, paintings that probably cost more than she would earn in 10 lifetimes. Every surface gleamed. Every corner was immaculate. And the silence was absolute. Marcus led her through a series of hallways, his footsteps barely making a sound. Elena tried to match his quiet stride, suddenly hyper-aware of every noise she made. Finally, they stopped in a small room near the back of the mansion, a storage closet filled with cleaning supplies. Marcus turned to face her. Before you begin, Miss Reyes, there are rules you must understand. His voice was low but firm, rules that every member of this staff follows without exception. Elena nodded quickly. Yes, sir. First, you do not speak to Mr. Blackwood unless he speaks to you directly. Even then, keep your answers brief. I understand. Second, you do not make noise. Walk softly. Work quietly. This house operates in silence. Yes, sir. Third, and this is the most important. Marcus paused, his eyes locking onto hers. You never enter the room at the end of the hallway on the 3rd floor. Never. Under any circumstances. Do you understand? Elena swallowed hard. I understand. Marcus studied her for a moment, as if weighing whether she truly grasped the gravity of his words. Then he nodded. Good. You will work primarily on the 1st and 2nd floors, cleaning, organizing, assisting wherever needed. Your shift ends at 5 p.m. Any questions? Elena shook her head. Then you may begin. For the next 2 hours, Elena worked in near total solitude. She dusted shelves. She polished silverware. She scrubbed floors that were already spotless. The mansion was so clean it seemed almost untouched, as if no one actually lived here. And then she heard it. Footsteps, heavy, deliberate, coming down the main staircase. Elena froze, her cloth pressed against a marble table. He appeared at the end of the hallway, Dominic Blackwood. He was exactly as the rumors described, tall, broad-shouldered, dressed entirely in black. His dark hair was slicked back, his jaw was sharp as a blade. His eyes, Elena couldn't see his eyes. He wasn't looking at her. He wasn't looking at anything. He simply walked past, his footsteps echoing through the corridor, his presence filling the space like a storm cloud. And then he was gone. Elena exhaled slowly. She hadn't realized she'd been holding her breath. It was strange. In that brief moment, she had expected to feel fear, and she did a little. But there was something else too, something she couldn't quite name. The air itself had seemed to thicken when he passed, as if the entire mansion held its breath along with her, as if even the walls were afraid of him. Elena turned back to her work, her hands trembling slightly. Stay invisible, she told herself. Do your job. Get paid. Go home to Lily. That was all that mattered. Nothing else. 2 weeks passed. Elena learned the rhythm of the Blackwood mansion like a dancer learning choreography. She arrived at exactly 7 each morning. She cleaned. She organized. She moved through the endless rooms like a ghost, touching everything and disturbing nothing. The other staff members rarely spoke to her. They rarely spoke to anyone. This was a house of silence, and everyone who worked here understood the unwritten rule, do your job and disappear. Elena was good at disappearing, but she was also good at watching. Every day, she observed Dominic Blackwood from a distance. Small moments, brief glimpses, pieces of a puzzle she couldn't help but try to assemble. She noticed that he always ate alone. The dining table could seat 20 people, but only 1 chair was ever used. He sat at the head, cutting his food mechanically, chewing without tasting. His eyes were always fixed on the window, staring at something far beyond the glass. She noticed that he paused sometimes on the 3rd floor, the forbidden hallway. He would stand there for minutes at a time, his hand hovering near the doorknob of that mysterious room. But he never went in. He always turned away at the last moment, his shoulders heavy, his steps slower than before. She noticed that he never smiled, not once. Not at Marcus. Not at the other staff. Not even when he spoke on the phone about business deals worth millions of dollars. His face was carved from stone, hence the nickname, she supposed. But it was the night she saw him in the dark that changed everything. It happened by accident. Elena had forgotten her phone in the supply closet and returned to the mansion late that evening to retrieve it. The security guard let her in through the service entrance, and she crept through the silent hallways with only the moonlight to guide her. She found her phone quickly, but as she turned to leave, she heard something, a sound, faint, almost imperceptible, breathing. Elena followed it without thinking. Down the corridor, past the library, into the main sitting room. And there he was. Dominic Blackwood sat alone in the darkness. No lights, no fire in the fireplace. Just shadows and silence. He was hunched forward in an armchair, his elbows on his knees, his head in his hands. He wasn't crying. He wasn't making any sound at all. But the weight of his solitude was so heavy that Elena could feel it pressing against her own chest. She stood frozen in the doorway, barely breathing. This was the most feared man in Chicago, the monster that everyone whispered about, the stone who felt nothing and feared no one. But right now, in this moment, he looked like a man who had been broken so completely that he had forgotten how to put himself back together. He's not scary, Elena realized suddenly. He's lonely. She slipped away before he could notice her, her heart pounding with something she couldn't name. The next morning, Elena returned to work as usual. She didn't mention what she had seen. She didn't tell anyone. But she couldn't stop thinking about it. What happened to him? What could possibly break a man like that? She was still lost in thought when her phone buzzed in her pocket. Rosa. Elena stepped into the supply closet and answered quickly. Rosa, is everything okay? Is Lily is fine. Mija. Rosa's voice was weak, raspy. But I'm not. Elena's stomach dropped. What's wrong? The doctor says it's a bad flu. Maybe worse. I can barely stand. Elena. Rosa coughed harshly. I'm so sorry. But I can't take care of Lily this week. I can barely take care of myself. Elena closed her eyes. No. Rosa, I understand. Just rest. Please, take care of yourself. I'm sorry, Mija. I know this puts you in a difficult position. It's okay. I'll figure something out. Elena hung up and leaned against the wall, her mind racing. No babysitter, no family, no friends who could help on such short notice. and a job she absolutely could not lose. What was she going to do? That night, Elena didn't sleep. She sat on her bed with her phone in her hand, scrolling through her contacts, calling every number she could think of. Maria from the laundromat. No answer. The teenage girl who lived 2 floors down, working a night shift. Her old coworker from the restaurant. Out of town visiting family. One by one, the options disappeared. By 2 a.m, Elena had called everyone she knew. No one could help. No one was available. No one. She stared at the ceiling, her mind spinning with impossible choices. Call in sick? She had already used her only sick day last month when Lily had a fever. Another absence would mean termination. Quit the job? The rent was due in 5 days. Without the Blackwood salary, she couldn't pay it. They would be on the street within a month. Leave Lily alone? Absolutely not. Never. Not even for a minute. Elena pressed her palms against her eyes, fighting back tears. There has to be another way. There has to be. Her phone buzzed. Rosa. Elena answered immediately. Rosa? How are you feeling? Worse. Rosa's voice was barely a whisper, broken by coughing. The fever is higher. The doctor says I need complete rest. Elena, I'm so sorry. Don't apologize. Please, just focus on getting better. But Lily, what will you do? Elena was silent for a long moment. I don't know, she admitted quietly. Rosa coughed again, then spoke slowly. Mija, I hate to say this, but maybe you should take her with you. What? To work? To the mansion? Elena's heart stopped. Rosa, that's impossible. If they find out I know it's dangerous. Rosa's voice cracked. But what choice do you have? You can't lose this job. Lily needs you to keep this job. Elena closed her eyes. The idea was insane, reckless, potentially catastrophic. But Rosa was right. What choice did she have? The next morning, Elena woke Lily earlier than usual. The little girl rubbed her eyes, confused. Mommy? Why so early? Elena knelt down and held her daughter's small hands. Lily, listen to me carefully. Today, you're going to come with Mommy to work. Lily's eyes widened. Really? Yes. But I need you to do something very important. Elena's voice was steady, but her hands were trembling. You have to be very, very quiet, like a little mouse. Can you do that? Lily nodded seriously, clutching Mr. Honey against her chest. And you have to stay in one room, a special room. You can't come out until Mommy says so. Do you understand? I understand, Mommy. Lily hugged her teddy bear tighter. I'll be good. I promise. Elena pulled her daughter into a tight embrace, breathing in the familiar scent of baby shampoo and innocence. Please let this work, please. An hour later, Elena approached the Blackwood mansion through the service entrance at the back. Lily was bundled in her arms, hidden beneath a large jacket. The diaper bag hung heavy on Elena's shoulder. Her heart was pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. The security guard barely glanced at her as she swiped her badge. He was reading a newspaper, uninterested. Elena slipped inside. The hallways were still empty at this hour. Most of the staff hadn't arrived yet. Elena moved quickly, her footsteps silent on the marble floor. She found the laundry room at the far end of the service wing, a small, forgotten space filled with washing machines and storage shelves. No one came here during the day. No one would notice. Elena set Lily down gently and began unpacking. iPad with headphones, coloring books, crayons, snacks, a blanket. Mr. Honey. Okay, mi amor. Elena arranged everything on the floor, creating a little nest. This is your special spot. You watch your shows, color your pictures, and eat your snacks. But you have to stay here. You can't leave this room. Okay? Lily nodded, already reaching for the iPad. And remember, Elena added, her voice urgent. No noise. Quiet like a mouse. Quiet like a mouse, Lily repeated solemnly. Elena kissed her daughter's forehead, then stood up. Every instinct screamed at her to stay, to not leave her child alone in this enormous, terrifying house. But she had no choice. She stepped out of the laundry room and closed the door behind her. For the next few hours, Elena worked in a state of constant terror. Every sound made her flinch. Every footstep made her freeze. She checked her phone obsessively, watching Lily through the baby monitor app she had set up on the iPad. So far, so good. Lily was being an angel, coloring quietly, watching cartoons with headphones, eating her crackers. Maybe this would work. Maybe everything would be fine. But deep down, Elena knew the truth. In the Blackwood mansion, nothing stayed hidden for long. 3 hours passed without incident. Elena dusted the main sitting room, her eyes constantly darting to her phone propped against a vase on the mantelpiece. The baby monitor app showed Lily exactly where she had left her, sitting on the blanket, coloring peacefully, Mr. Honey tucked under one arm. Good girl. Such a good girl. Elena allowed herself a small breath of relief. Maybe this would actually work. Maybe she could survive this day without disaster. She moved to the large windows, spraying glass cleaner and wiping in careful circles. The afternoon sun streamed through, casting golden rectangles on the marble floor. On her phone screen, Lily shifted position. The little girl stretched her legs, looked around the small laundry room, then returned to her coloring book. Elena smiled softly and kept working. What she didn't see, what the camera angle didn't capture, was Lily's growing restlessness. The little girl had been sitting for hours. Her legs were cramped, her attention was fading, and the door was right there. Mommy said stay here, but Lily was 3 years old, and 3-year-olds were not known for patience. She stood up slowly. Mr. Honey clutched against her chest. Her small fingers reached for the door handle. Just a peek. Just a tiny peek. The door creaked open. Lily stepped into the hallway. To her eyes, the Blackwood mansion was not a house. It was a castle from one of her storybooks. The ceilings stretched impossibly high. The chandeliers sparkled like frozen waterfalls. The paintings showed people in fancy clothes, staring down at her with serious faces. Lily walked slowly, her bare feet silent on the cold marble. She passed doorway after doorway, each one revealing rooms bigger than her entire apartment. So many rooms, so many secrets. She turned a corner and stopped. A door stood slightly open at the end of the hall. Warm light spilled through the gap. Lily tilted her head curiously. What's in there? She pushed the door with her tiny hand. It swung open without a sound. The room inside was different from the others. It had a big desk covered in papers, tall shelves filled with books, a leather chair that looked like a throne, and on the desk a photograph in a silver frame. Lily walked closer, rising on her tiptoes to see. The photograph showed a girl with long dark hair and a bright smile. She was holding a teddy bear, just like Mr. Honey. Lily smiled. The girl in the picture had a friend too. She was still looking at the photograph when the front door of the mansion opened downstairs. Dominic Blackwood stepped inside, his expression darker than usual. The meeting had been a waste of time. The investors were idiots, and his head was pounding with a migraine that no amount of whiskey could fix. Marcus appeared in the foyer, slightly surprised. Sir, you're home early. The meeting was scheduled until 5, cancelled. Dominic walked past him without stopping. I'll be in my study. No interruptions. Yes, sir. Dominic climbed the stairs with heavy steps. His jaw was tight. His shoulders were tense. All he wanted was silence and solitude. He reached his study door and stopped. The door was open. He never left it open. Dominic's hand moved instinctively toward the gun concealed beneath his jacket. He approached slowly, muscles coiled, ready for anything. He pushed the door wider and stepped inside, and froze. Standing in the middle of his study, bathed in afternoon light, was a child, a little girl, no more than 3 years old. She had dark curly hair and enormous brown eyes. She wore a simple pink dress with a stain on the hem, and she was clutching a worn teddy bear against her chest. She looked up at him without fear, without recognition, without any understanding of who he was or what he could do. She simply looked at him the way children look at everything, with pure, innocent curiosity. Dominic couldn't move. He couldn't breathe, because for one impossible moment, he wasn't seeing this strange child. He was seeing Isabella. Isabella at 3 years old. Isabella with her teddy bear. Isabella looking at him with those same trusting eyes, before the world had broken them both. The little girl tilted her head. Hi, she said softly. And Dominic Blackwood, the stone, the monster, the man who feared nothing, felt something crack inside his chest. Time stopped. Dominic stood in the doorway of his study, every muscle frozen, every thought scattered. His hand had dropped from his gun. His breath had stopped in his lungs. The little girl continued to stare at him with those enormous brown eyes. No fear, no hesitation, just pure, unfiltered curiosity. Hi, she said again, her small voice filling the silence. Who are you? Dominic opened his mouth, but no words came out. Who was he? He was Dominic Blackwood, the stone, the monster that haunted Chicago's nightmares. He had made grown men weep for mercy. He had built an empire on blood and fear, but standing here, facing this tiny child, he couldn't remember any of it. Lily tilted her head to one side, studying him the way she studied everything, with the intense focus of a 3-year-old trying to understand the world. Are you hurt? She asked suddenly. The question caught Dominic off guard. What? Are you hurt? Lily repeated patiently. You look hurt. No. The word came out rough, barely more than a whisper. I'm not hurt. Lily frowned slightly. Her small eyebrows drew together in concentration. Then why do your eyes look so sad? Dominic felt the words hit him like a physical blow, straight to the chest, straight through every wall he had built over the past 6 years. No one asked him questions like that. No one looked at him long enough to see anything beyond the surface. No one dared, but this child, this tiny, innocent creature had looked at him for less than a minute and seen what the entire world had missed. Sadness. Dominic couldn't respond. His throat had closed completely. Lily seemed to sense his struggle. She looked down at the teddy bear in her arms, then back up at him. This is Mr. Honey, she said, lifting the worn bear toward him. When I'm sad, I hug him and I feel better. She paused, then extended her arms further. Do you want to borrow him? The world tilted. Suddenly, Dominic wasn't in his study anymore. He was 25 years younger, standing in a different room, watching a different girl offer him a different bear. Isabella, 3 years old, dark curly hair, enormous eyes full of light. Here, Dom, you can hug Teddy. He makes everything better. The memory was so vivid, so sharp, that Dominic could smell the lilac perfume their mother used to wear. He could hear Isabella's giggle echoing through the hallway. He could feel the soft fur of that old teddy bear pressed against his palm. And then the memory shattered. And he was back in the present, back in his study, back with this stranger's child who looked nothing like Isabella and yet reminded him of her in every possible way. Dominic's legs gave out. He didn't decide to kneel. His body simply collapsed, bringing him down to the little girl's level. His eyes were burning. His chest was tight. His hands were shaking. Who? His voice cracked. He tried again. Who are you? Lily smiled brightly. I'm Lily, and this is Mr. Honey. We're friends. Lily. Her name was Lily. Dominic stared at her, unable to look away, unable to think, unable to do anything, except kneel there on the cold floor, feeling something crack open inside him that had been sealed shut for 6 years. And then Mr. Blackwood. The voice came from the doorway, panicked, terrified. Elena stood there, her face completely drained of color. Her eyes were wide with horror. Her chest was heaving as if she had run a marathon. Mr. Blackwood, I can explain. Please, I'm so sorry, I didn't mean for this to happen. The words tumbled out in a desperate flood. Her hands were shaking. Her entire body was trembling. She looked like someone facing a firing squad, but Dominic barely heard her. He was still kneeling on the floor, still staring at the little girl named Lily, still holding on to the last thread of whatever was keeping him from falling apart completely. Elena stood frozen in the doorway, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might burst through her chest. This was it, the end. Everything she had worked for gone in an instant. She waited for Dominic to stand up, to turn around, to unleash the fury that everyone in Chicago whispered about. She waited for the cold voice, the cutting words, the dismissal that would send her back to poverty. But Dominic didn't move. He remained kneeling on the floor, his back to Elena, his entire focus locked on the small girl in front of him. Lily looked past him at her mother, then back at the strange man who seemed so lost. Don't be sad anymore, Lily said softly. And then she did what Lily always did when someone was hurting. She stepped forward and wrapped her tiny arms around Dominic's neck. Elena's breath caught in her throat. No, Lily, no, but it was too late. Lily pressed her small body against Dominic's chest, her arms barely reaching around his broad shoulders. Mr. Honey was squished between them. Her cheek rested against his collarbone. It was a simple hug, the kind children give freely, without thought, without expectation. The kind of hug Dominic hadn't received in 6 years. He went completely rigid. His hands hovered in the air, unsure where to go. His eyes were wide, unfocused. His entire body seemed to have forgotten how to function. Elena watched in horror, waiting for him to push Lily away, waiting for the explosion. But the explosion never came. Instead, something else happened. Something impossible. Dominic Blackwood's shoulders began to shake. At first, Elena thought he was angry, trembling with rage, but then she saw his face, really saw it, and realized the truth. He was crying. The tears came silently. No sobs. No sounds. Just a steady stream of moisture sliding down his cheeks, dripping onto the collar of his expensive shirt. His hands finally moved. They came down slowly, hesitantly, and wrapped around Lily's small frame. Not tight, not possessive, just holding, as if she were made of glass. as if she were the most precious thing he had ever touched. Elena couldn't move, couldn't speak, couldn't do anything except stand there and witness the most feared man in Chicago falling apart in the arms of her 3-year-old daughter. She had expected many things when she took this job. Danger, coldness, fear. She had not expected this. Lily seemed completely unfazed by the situation. She simply held on, patting Dominic's back with her small hand the way Elena patted hers when she had nightmares. "It's okay," Lily whispered. "Hugs make the sad go away. Mommy says so." A sound escaped Dominic's throat, something between a laugh and a sob. Broken, raw, human. The tears kept falling. Lily pulled back slightly, looking at his wet face with concern. "You're crying," she observed matter-of-factly. Dominic couldn't respond. His voice was gone. "That's okay," Lily continued, reaching up to pat his cheek with her tiny palm. "Sometimes crying helps too. Mommy cries sometimes. Then she hugs me and feels better." Elena felt her own eyes burning. Finally, Dominic spoke. His voice was shattered, barely recognizable. "How old are you?" Lily smiled proudly and held up 3 fingers. 3. I'm a big girl now, 3 years old, the same age Isabella was when Dominic first understood what it meant to love someone completely. The same age she was when she became the center of his universe. And now, 22 years later, another 3-year-old had done what no one else could. She had broken through the stone. She had found the human being buried beneath. Dominic looked at this child, this stranger's child who had wandered into his study by accident and felt something shift inside him. Something that had been locked away for 6 years. Something that felt terrifyingly like hope. For a long moment, no one moved. The study was silent except for the soft rustling of Lily playing with Mr. Honey on the carpet, completely unaware of the tension surrounding her. Then Dominic released a slow breath. He loosened his hold on Lily gently, letting her slip back to the floor. His hands rose to his face, wiping away the traces of tears with quick, rough movements. When he finally stood, his legs felt unsteady beneath him. He turned his back to Elena, facing the window. His reflection stared back at him, red eyes, wet cheeks, the face of a man who had just been stripped bare. He hated it, but he couldn't undo what had happened. Behind him, Elena's voice burst out in a panicked flood. "Mr. Blackwood, please let me explain. My neighbor Rosa, she watches Lily for me every day, but she got sick, really sick. The flu, maybe worse. And I called everyone I know, but no one could help. I didn't have a choice. I couldn't miss work, and I couldn't leave Lily alone. I know I broke the rules. I know I should have said something. I'll pack my things right now. I'm so sorry. Please, just stop. One word. Quiet, but absolute." Elena's mouth snapped shut. The silence stretched. 10 seconds. 20. An eternity. Elena stood rigid, her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles had gone white. This was it. He was going to fire her. He was going to make her regret ever stepping foot in this mansion. Dominic turned around slowly. His face had changed. The vulnerability was gone, locked away behind the familiar mask of stone. But something in his eyes was different, softer, almost human. "What's your name?" he asked. Elena blinked, caught off guard. Elena. Elena Reyes, sir. Elena." He repeated it as if testing the sound. "And the neighbor who watches your daughter, when will she recover? Maybe. A week?" The doctor wasn't sure. Dominic's gaze shifted to Lily, who had found a paperweight on his desk and was examining it with intense fascination. He watched her for a long moment. The way she turned the object in her small hands, the way her curls bounced when she moved, the way she hummed a tuneless song under her breath. Something flickered across his face. Something painful and tender all at once. "Bring her here," Dominic said finally. Elena's heart stopped. "What?" "Every day, until your neighbor is well enough to watch her again." Dominic's voice was flat, businesslike, as if he were discussing a contract. "Bring her here." Elena couldn't process the words. They didn't make sense. None of this made sense. "Sir, are you serious? I don't say things I don't mean." Dominic turned away again, his hands clasped behind his back. "But there are rules. She stays in the laundry room. She doesn't wander. And no one else knows about this. Not the staff. Not anyone. Is that clear?" "Yes. Yes, sir. Absolutely." Elena's voice trembled with disbelief. "I don't know what to say. Thank you. Thank you so much." Dominic didn't respond. He walked toward the door, his footsteps heavy on the hardwood floor, but just before he crossed the threshold, he stopped. His hand rested on the doorframe. His back was still turned. The girl, he said quietly. What's her name? Lily, sir. Her name is Lily. Silence. Then, so softly that Elena almost missed it, Dominic repeated the name. Lily. He said it the way someone might say a prayer, or a memory, or a hope they were afraid to believe in, and then he was gone, disappearing down the hallway, leaving Elena standing alone in his study with her daughter, and 1,000 questions she couldn't answer. Lily looked up from the paperweight. Mommy, the sad man is nice. Elena let out a shaky laugh, sinking to her knees beside her daughter. Yeah, baby. She pulled Lily into a tight embrace. I think maybe he is. The first day, Dominic avoided her completely. Elena brought Lily to the laundry room as instructed, set up her coloring books and snacks, and went to work. She checked the baby monitor obsessively. Lily stayed put mostly, and Dominic was nowhere to be seen. The second day, Elena noticed something strange. She was cleaning the hallway near the service wing when she heard footsteps, heavy, deliberate. She pressed herself against the wall, invisible, and watched. Dominic walked past the laundry room door. He didn't stop, didn't look inside. But his pace slowed just for a moment as he passed. Then he continued on, disappearing around the corner. The third day, it happened again, and the fourth, and the fifth. He never entered, never spoke, but he always walked past that door at least twice a day, his footsteps lingering just long enough to hear the soft sounds of a child playing inside. By the 6th day, Lily had grown restless. The laundry room was small. The same toys, the same walls, the same everything. And Lily was 3 years old, an age when curiosity was stronger than any rule. She escaped again. Dominic was in the main sitting room, reading the morning paper, when he felt a tug on his pant leg. He looked down. Lily stood there, Mr. Honey tucked under one arm, her eyes bright with interest. What are you reading? She asked. Can you read it to me? Dominic stared at her. You should be in the laundry room. It's boring there. Lily climbed onto the sofa beside him without invitation. Read to me, please. Dominic opened his mouth to refuse, to call for Elena, to send this child back where she belonged, but Lily had already snuggled against his side, looking up at him expectantly. He read her the business section. She fell asleep after 2 paragraphs. The next morning, Dominic was eating breakfast alone as always when Lily appeared in the dining room doorway. Lily is hungry, she announced. Do you have pancakes? Dominic set down his fork. How did you get out again? The door was open. Lily walked to the table and attempted to climb onto the chair across from him. Her legs were too short. She struggled, nearly fell, and finally managed to pull herself up triumphantly. There are no pancakes, Dominic said flatly. What about toast? You should go back with jam. I like strawberry jam. Dominic stared at this tiny invader who had somehow conquered his fortress. 5 minutes later, Lily was eating toast with strawberry jam while Dominic watched in bewildered silence. 2 days later, the incident with the phone call happened. Dominic was in his study, negotiating a deal worth millions of dollars, when the door creaked open. He didn't notice at first, too focused on the numbers, the percentages, the cold language of business. Then a piece of paper appeared in front of his face. Lily stood beside his chair, holding up a crayon drawing. This is you, she declared proudly. See? That's your hair, and your eyes, and your... She frowned at the scribbled figure. I couldn't draw your sad face right, so I made you smile instead. Dominic looked at the drawing, a stick figure with wild black hair and an enormous curved line for a mouth. I'm on a call, he said quietly. I know, but I wanted to show you. Lily placed the drawing on his desk. You can keep it. So you remember to smile. She skipped out of the room before he could respond. On the other end of the phone, a confused investor asked if everything was all right. Dominic realized he had been silent for 30 seconds. Marcus saw everything. The old butler had served this family for over 2 decades. He had watched Dominic grow from a grieving young man into a cold, untouchable king. He had witnessed the darkness settle in after Isabella's death. But now, for the first time in 6 years, he was witnessing something else. Change. On the 8th day, Elena finished her work early and went to collect Lily from the laundry room. But Lily wasn't there. Panic surged through Elena's chest. She searched the hallways, the kitchen, the garden. Nothing. Finally, she heard something coming from the main sitting room. Laughter. A child's laughter. Elena crept to the doorway and looked inside. Dominic Blackwood, the stone, the monster, the most feared man in Chicago, was sitting cross-legged on the floor. Lily sat across from him. Between them, a half-finished puzzle was spread across the carpet. This piece goes here, Lily instructed, pointing with authority. That doesn't fit. Yes, it does. You have to push harder. Dominic pushed. The piece didn't fit. Lily sighed dramatically. Okay, maybe not that one. Elena stood frozen, unable to believe what she was seeing. The man on the floor wasn't the stone. He was someone else entirely. Someone she had never expected to find in this cold, silent house. Someone human. Vincent Blackwood arrived at the mansion without warning. This was intentional. He had learned long ago that unannounced visits revealed more than scheduled ones. People hid things when they knew you were coming. They prepared, they rehearsed, but catch them off guard and the truth always surfaced. The silver Bentley pulled into the driveway at 2 p.m. Vincent stepped out, adjusting his cufflinks, surveying the property with the practiced eye of a man who noticed everything. The front door was answered by Marcus. Mr. Vincent. The butler's expression remained neutral, but there was something in his posture, a slight tension, that Vincent immediately registered. We weren't expecting you. I was in the area. Vincent smiled warmly. Is my nephew home? Mr. Blackwood is. In the garden, sir. The hesitation was brief, almost imperceptible, almost wonderful. I'll find him myself. Vincent walked through the mansion with the familiarity of someone who had spent decades in these halls, past the sitting room, through the conservatory, toward the French doors that opened onto the rear garden. And then he heard it. Laughter. A child's laughter. Vincent stopped mid-stride. That sound didn't belong here. It had never existed in this house, not since Isabella was alive. The Blackwood mansion was a place of silence and shadows. Not laughter. Never laughter. He moved toward the sound, his footsteps silent on the stone path. Through the hedges, he saw them. Dominic was crouched in the grass, his sleeves rolled up, his jacket discarded on a nearby bench. Before him stood a little girl no more than 3 years old with dark curly hair and a worn teddy bear clutched in her arms. She was showing him something in the flower bed. A ladybug, perhaps, or a butterfly, and Dominic was watching her with an expression that Vincent had not seen in 6 years. Softness, tenderness, life. Vincent's warm smile froze on his face. Then, slowly, it became something else. Something colder, calculating. Dominic looked up and saw his uncle standing at the edge of the garden. The transformation was instantaneous. The softness vanished. The walls slammed back into place. Dominic rose to his full height, his expression hardening into the familiar mask of stone. Vincent. His voice was flat. You should have called. Family doesn't need appointments. Vincent approached slowly, his eyes fixed on the child. But I see you have company. Lily looked up at the stranger with curious eyes. She didn't seem afraid. She was never afraid of anyone. Who are you? She asked directly. Vincent crouched down, smiling the smile he used for investors and politicians. I'm Dominic's uncle. And who might you be, little one? I'm Lily. This is Mr. Honey. How delightful. Vincent straightened and turned to Dominic. You've been keeping secrets, nephew. She's the daughter of one of the staff. Dominic's voice was controlled, revealing nothing. Her babysitter is ill. It's temporary. Temporary. Vincent repeated the word as if tasting it. Of course. The silence between them stretched tight. Vincent clasped his hands behind his back, his gaze never leaving Dominic's face. You know what I see when I look at you right now? He asked quietly. I see someone different. Someone softer. He tilted his head. Should I be concerned? Concerned about what? About you, Dominic. About your state of mind. Vincent paused, letting the words sink in. I worry that you might be trying to replace someone with this child. The air turned cold. Dominic's eyes darkened. Dangerous, deadly, careful, uncle. I'm only making an observation. Vincent raised his hands in mock surrender. You know I only want what's best for you. What's best for the family. He took a step back, still smiling that empty smile. I should go. Business calls. He glanced once more at Lily, then back at Dominic. We'll talk soon. He turned and walked away, his footsteps unhurried, his posture relaxed. But the moment he reached his car and the door closed behind him, the mask dropped completely. His jaw tightened. His eyes went flat and cold. He pulled out his phone and dialed a number. It's me, he said quietly. I need you to find everything you can about a woman named Elena Reyes. She works at the Blackwood mansion. I want to know where she came from, who she is, what she's hiding. He paused, looking back at the house through the tinted window. And I need it by tomorrow. The call ended. The Bentley pulled away, and inside the mansion, Dominic stood alone in the garden, holding Lily's small hand, feeling the storm clouds gathering on the horizon. The evening had settled over the mansion like a soft blanket. Lily lay curled on the sitting room sofa, Mr. Honey tucked beneath her chin, her small chest rising and falling in the peaceful rhythm of sleep. She had exhausted herself running through the garden, drawing pictures, asking Dominic 1,000 questions about everything and nothing. Now she was still, silent, perfect. Dominic sat in the armchair across from her, watching. Just watching. The fireplace crackled softly. The light danced across Lily's sleeping face, painting shadows and gold across her features. He didn't know how long he had been sitting there when he heard footsteps behind him. Elena appeared in the doorway, her work finished for the day. She saw Lily on the sofa and moved toward her quietly. "I'll take her now," she whispered. "I'm sorry she fell asleep here. I didn't mean—" "Wait." The word came out before Dominic could stop it. Elena froze, her hands hovering over her daughter. "Sit down," Dominic said quietly. "Please." It wasn't a command. It was a request, perhaps the first genuine request he had made in years. Elena hesitated, then slowly lowered herself onto the edge of the sofa, careful not to wake Lily. Her hands clasped together in her lap. Her posture was tense, uncertain. The silence stretched between them. Dominic didn't look at her. His eyes remained fixed on Lily's sleeping form. "I had a sister once," he said finally. Elena's breath caught. Her name was Isabella. The name hung in the air like smoke, heavy, fragile, sacred. She was like Lily. Dominic's voice was low, rough with emotion he rarely allowed himself to feel. She laughed at everything. She wasn't afraid of anyone. She looked at the world like it was full of magic and wonder. He paused, his jaw tightened. 6 years ago, she was killed. Elena's hand flew to her chest. "Because of me. Because of what I do. Who I am." Dominic's fingers curled around the armrest of his chair. "They wanted to hurt me. So they took her. The only person I ever—" He couldn't finish the sentence. The fire crackled. Lily murmured something in her sleep and shifted slightly. "I shut down after that," Dominic continued, his voice barely above a whisper. "I stopped feeling anything. It was easier that way. Safer. I became what everyone called me, the stone. Cold, untouchable, dead inside." He finally looked at Elena. "And then your daughter wandered into my study." Elena couldn't speak. Tears were forming in her eyes, but she didn't dare let them fall. "Lily isn't Isabella," Dominic said slowly. "I know that. I'm not trying to replace her. No one could ever replace her." He swallowed hard. "But when Lily looks at me, when she smiles at me, I feel something I thought was gone forever." "What?" Elena whispered. "Alive." The word broke something in his voice. "I feel alive." The room fell silent again. Elena looked at this man, this feared, powerful, dangerous man, and saw what she had glimpsed that night in the darkness weeks ago. Not a monster. A broken human being. "Mr. Blackwood," she said softly, "you're not a monster. You're just someone in pain." Dominic's eyes met hers. Something shifted in his expression. The walls didn't fall completely, perhaps they never would, but a crack appeared. A window. A glimpse of the man behind the stone. "You're the first person who has ever said that to me," he said quietly. Elena held his gaze. She didn't look away, didn't flinch. "Maybe," she said gently. "You needed someone to say it." The fire continued to burn. Lily continued to sleep, and in that quiet moment, something formed between them, fragile as glass, precious as gold. A connection, real, unexpected, undeniable. Neither of them knew what it meant or where it would lead. But for the first time in 6 years, Dominic Blackwood felt something other than emptiness. And for the first time in her life, Elena Reyes saw past the shadows to the light struggling to break through. Midnight came and went. Dominic lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, sleep refusing to find him. The conversation with Elena kept replaying in his mind. Her words, her eyes, the way she had looked at him without fear, without judgment. "You're not a monster. You're just someone in pain." He turned onto his side, then onto his back again. The sheets felt suffocating. The silence felt deafening. Finally, he gave up. He rose from the bed and walked barefoot across the cold marble floor. The mansion was completely still, that heavy, oppressive stillness he had grown so accustomed to over the years. But tonight, it felt different. Tonight, it felt like the house itself was waiting for something. Dominic stopped in front of the safe. The small black box sat in the corner of his bedroom, unchanged for 6 years. He had walked past it thousands of times. He had touched it occasionally, his fingers brushing the cold metal surface before pulling away. But he had never opened it, not once, not since the day he locked everything inside and swore he would never look back. His hand trembled as he reached for the keypad. The numbers were burned into his memory Isabella's birthday. He had never been able to choose a different code. He entered the combination. The lock clicked. The door swung open. Inside, preserved exactly as he had left them, were the remnants of a life cut short. A small music box porcelain, painted with delicate roses. Isabella had received it on her 10th birthday. She used to play it every night before sleep. Photographs. Dozens of them. Isabella as a baby. Isabella learning to ride a bike. Isabella graduating from high school. Isabella laughing, always laughing. And a letter, a single envelope, yellowed with age, with his name written on the front in Isabella's looping handwriting. She had written it 3 days before she died. He had found it in her apartment afterward, tucked inside a book she knew he would eventually read. He had opened it once, only once, and the pain had been so unbearable that he had locked it away along with everything else. Now, with shaking hands, he unfolded it again. "Dear Dom," the letter began. A memory crashed over him. Isabella at 8 years old, running toward him with her arms wide open, her dark hair flying behind her. "You're my hero, Dom. You'll always be my hero." He had caught her, swung her around, promised to protect her forever. A promise he had failed to keep. Dominic's eyes burned as he continued reading. "I know you try so hard to protect me. I know you worry about me every single day, but I want you to know something, just in case you ever forget. I love you. No matter what happens, no matter where life takes us, you are the best brother anyone could ever have. You gave up so much for me. You sacrificed so much. And all I want, the only thing I've ever wanted, is for you to be happy. Promise me, Dom. Promise me you won't let the darkness swallow you. Promise me you'll find a reason to smile again. I love you forever. Your little sister, Isabella." The letter slipped from Dominic's fingers. He collapsed onto his knees, his body folding in on itself. The sobs came deep, wrenching, ugly sounds that tore through 6 years of silence and denial. This wasn't like the tears Lily had drawn from him. Those had been shock, surprise, a crack in the armor. This was something else entirely. This was grief. Real grief. The kind he had never allowed himself to feel. He reached into the safe and pulled out the music box. His fingers found the small key on the bottom and turned it. The melody began to play. Soft, delicate, heartbreaking. Dominic closed his eyes and let it wash over him. For 6 years, he had been running from this moment, hiding from the pain, burying himself in coldness and cruelty because feeling nothing was easier than feeling this. But Lily had broken through. Elena had broken through. And now, finally, Dominic was breaking too. But this time, breaking felt like healing. The music box played on, its gentle notes filling the empty bedroom, and Dominic knelt on the floor, holding his sister's memory close, crying for everything he had lost and everything he still hoped to find. The meeting took place at Eclipse, in the private room reserved for only the most important discussions. 8 underbosses sat around the mahogany table, the same men who had trembled before Dominic just weeks ago, the same men who would never dare question his authority. But tonight, Dominic's chair was empty. Vincent stood at the head of the table, his hands clasped behind his back, his expression grave with rehearsed concern. "Gentlemen," he began, "thank you for coming on such short notice. I wouldn't have called this meeting if I didn't believe it was absolutely necessary." The underbosses exchanged uneasy glances. A meeting without the boss was unprecedented. "Dangerous. Where's Dominic?" Tony Russo asked, his voice thin with nervousness. "That's precisely why we're here." Vincent sighed heavily, the picture of a worried family member. "I'm afraid our leader has become compromised." Silence. "What do you mean, compromised?" another underboss demanded. Vincent began to pace slowly around the table. "Over the past few weeks, I've observed troubling changes in my nephew. He's been distracted, unfocused, missing meetings, canceling deals." He paused dramatically. "All because of a woman. And a child." Murmurs rippled through the room. "A cleaning woman, to be specific. And her 3-year-old daughter." Vincent shook his head sadly. "Dominic has become attached to this child. Emotionally attached. He spends hours playing with her instead of running our operations. He confides in this woman instead of his own family." "But, sir," one of the men interjected, "Dominic has always delivered. The organization is strong. For now." Vincent cut him off. "But how long before his distraction costs us? How long before our enemies sense weakness?" He stopped pacing and faced the table directly. I love my nephew. I raised him after his parents died, but I cannot stand by and watch him destroy everything we've built. He let the words sink in. I'm calling for a vote. Temporary transfer of leadership to me, until Dominic returns to his senses, until he becomes the stone again. The room went cold. Before anyone could respond, the door burst open. Dominic stood in the doorway, his eyes blazing with a fury none of them had ever seen. Behind him, Marcus stood quietly, the loyal butler who had alerted his master the moment he learned of Vincent's scheme. Everyone out, Dominic said, his voice low and deadly. Now. The underbosses didn't need to be told twice. They scrambled from their chairs and fled the room, leaving uncle and nephew alone. The door closed. Silence. Vincent didn't flinch. He simply smiled, that same warm, empty smile. Dominic, I didn't expect you. Clearly. Dominic walked toward him slowly, each step deliberate, calling a meeting without me, proposing a vote to take my position. That sounds like a coup, uncle. It's not a coup. Vincent's voice remained calm, reasonable. It's concern. I'm trying to protect you from yourself. Protect me? Dominic laughed bitterly. You want to control me. You always have. I want what's best for this family, for our legacy. Vincent stepped closer, his eyes hardening. You're slipping, Dominic. This woman, this child, they're making you weak. The men see it. Our enemies will see it soon. What do you want? Vincent didn't hesitate. Fire the woman. Send the child away. Cut all ties. His voice turned cold. Return to who you were. The stone. The leader this organization needs. Dominic stared at his uncle. The man who had raised him. The man who had stood by him through every war, every loss. The man who now wanted him to give up the only light he had found in 6 years of darkness. And if I refuse? Vincent's smile faded completely. Then I will do what must be done to protect our interests. He straightened his jacket. You have 48 hours to decide, Dominic. Choose wisely. He walked past his nephew without another word, disappearing through the door. Dominic stood alone in the empty room, his fists clenched, his heart pounding. 48 hours. To choose between power and humanity, between the empire he had built and the people who had saved him, between the stone and the man he was finally learning to become. Dominic returned to the mansion at midnight, his mind still reeling from Vincent's ultimatum. 48 hours. Choose between the empire and his humanity. He walked through the dark hallways, his footsteps echoing in the silence. Elena and Lily had gone home hours ago. The staff had retired for the night. He was alone, as he had always been. But as he approached his study, he found Marcus waiting in the shadows. The old butler stood motionless, his face unreadable. In his hands, he held a manila envelope, thick, worn, as if it had been handled many times over many years. Marcus. Dominic stopped. What are you doing here? Waiting for you, sir. Marcus stepped forward, his eyes heavy with something Dominic couldn't identify. Guilt, perhaps, or grief. There's something you need to see. He extended the envelope. Dominic took it, frowning. What is this? Something I should have given you 6 years ago. Marcus's voice cracked slightly. I was afraid. Afraid of what it would do to you. Afraid of what you might do. He paused, steadying himself. But after tonight, after what Vincent tried to pull, you deserve the truth. Dominic's blood ran cold. He opened the envelope. Inside were documents, photographs, phone records, bank statements, a web of evidence so detailed, so damning, that its meaning was impossible to miss. Vincent had sold Isabella's location to the Morano family. Vincent had arranged the attack that killed her. Vincent had murdered Dominic's sister. The papers trembled in Dominic's hands. No, he whispered. No, this can't be right. It's right, sir. Marcus's voice was barely audible. I verified everything, multiple times. Vincent made a deal with the Moranos. He gave them Isabella in exchange for territorial agreements. He knew exactly what would happen to her. Dominic couldn't breathe. The memories came flooding back. Isabella's funeral, the unbearable grief, the weeks he spent unable to eat, unable to sleep, unable to function. And Vincent had been there through all of it, holding his hand, whispering encouragement, helping him rebuild. I'll take care of everything, nephew. You just focus on healing. Let me handle the organization until you're ready. It had seemed like kindness, like family loyalty, but it was manipulation, control. Vincent had broken Dominic so he could own him. 6 years, Dominic said, his voice hollow. For 6 years, he stood beside me. He ate at my table. He called me nephew. His hands curled into fists, crumpling the papers. And all along, He was the one who killed her. Sir, I let him into my life. Dominic's voice rose, cracking with rage and anguish. I trusted him. And he murdered Isabella, my sister, my only family, just so he could control me. The envelope fell to the floor, papers scattered across the marble. Dominic stood there, chest heaving, his entire world collapsing and rebuilding itself in the same moment. Everything he thought he knew was a lie. Every moment of comfort Vincent had offered was poison. Every piece of advice was a chain designed to keep him bound. Marcus waited in silence, giving his master space to process the unthinkable. Finally, Dominic spoke again. Why now, Marcus? His voice was quiet now, dangerously calm. Why tell me now, after all these years? Because 6 years ago, you would have destroyed yourself trying to destroy him. Marcus met his eyes steadily. But now you have something to live for. Now you have a reason to survive what comes next. Lily's face flashed through Dominic's mind. Her innocent smile, her fearless eyes, her tiny arms wrapped around his neck. Elena's voice echoed in his memory. You're not a monster. You're just someone in pain. Dominic straightened slowly. When he looked up, his eyes were cold, but not empty, not like before. This was a different kind of cold, focused, purposeful. The cold of a man who finally knew exactly what he had to do. What will you do now, sir? Marcus asked quietly. Dominic picked up the scattered papers, placing them carefully back in the envelope. I'm going to end this, he said, once and for all. The meeting was scheduled for noon at Eclipse. Every underboss was present, every lieutenant, every significant player in the Blackwood organization. Vincent had made sure of that. He wanted witnesses for his moment of triumph. He sat at the head of the table, in Dominic's chair, looking every inch the leader he believed himself to be. His confidence was absolute. The 48 hours had passed. Dominic had made no move, said nothing. Vincent had already begun drafting plans for his new era. Gentlemen, Vincent began, rising from his seat, I've called you here today to discuss the future of our organization. As you know, there have been concerns about our current leadership. The door opened. Dominic walked in. He moved slowly, deliberately, his eyes scanning the room with an intensity that made several men look away. Behind him came Marcus, carrying a thick manila envelope. Vincent's smile flickered, but he recovered quickly. Dominic, I didn't expect you to attend. I'm sure you didn't. Dominic walked to the center of the room and stopped. He didn't take his usual seat at the head of the table. He simply stood there, facing everyone. Before my uncle continues, Dominic said calmly, there's something you all need to see. He took the envelope from Marcus and emptied its contents onto the table. Documents, photographs, bank records, phone transcripts. 6 years ago, Dominic said, his voice steady, my sister Isabella was murdered by the Morano family. I believed it was retaliation for a business dispute. I believed it was my fault, my failure to protect her. He paused, letting the silence build. I was wrong. Vincent's face had gone pale. These documents prove that Vincent Blackwood sold my sister's location to the Moranos. He arranged her death. He used her murder to break me down so he could control me and control this organization. The room erupted in murmurs. The underbosses stared at the evidence spread before them, then at Vincent, then back at Dominic. This is absurd, Vincent said quickly, forcing a laugh. Dominic, you're clearly unwell. These documents are fabricated bank records showing payments from Morano accounts to yours, Dominic continued coldly. Phone logs proving you contacted them the night before Isabella died. Testimony from a Morano soldier who was there when the deal was made. He looked directly at his uncle. Should I continue? Vincent's mask cracked. For one moment, the calculating snake beneath the warm exterior was visible to everyone in the room. You don't understand, Vincent hissed. Everything I did was for the family, for the organization. You were weak, Dominic. You needed guidance. I needed my sister. Dominic's voice thundered through the room. And you took her from me. Silence. The underbosses looked at Vincent with new eyes. The man who had positioned himself as the concerned uncle, the loyal advisor, the protector of the family, revealed as a murderer and a traitor. One by one, they turned away from him. Vincent stood alone. In the old days, Dominic would have killed him on the spot. A bullet to the head, a message to anyone who dared betray the Blackwood family. But that was the stone, the monster, the man Dominic no longer wanted to be. Get out of Chicago, Dominic said quietly. Tonight, and never come back. Vincent stared at him in disbelief. You're letting me live? You're making a mistake. You're being weak, maybe. Dominic met his uncle's eyes without flinching. But I'm done being a monster. I'm done being what you made me. Vincent opened his mouth to argue, but 2 underbosses had already moved to flank him. The message was clear: he was no longer welcome here. As Vincent was escorted out, he turned back one final time. "You'll regret this," he spat. "Without me, you're nothing." "Without you," Dominic replied, "I'm finally free." The door closed. Dominic stood before his men, the empire he had built, the power he had accumulated over 2 decades. And then he said the words no one expected. "I'm stepping down." Shock rippled through the room. "This organization will continue," Dominic continued, "but without me at its head. Tony will assume leadership. The transition will be orderly." He looked around at the faces of men who had feared him, obeyed him, served him for years. "I'm choosing a different life now." And without another word, Dominic Blackwood walked out of Eclipse, leaving his empire behind, choosing freedom over power, choosing love over darkness, choosing to live. 6 months later, the Blackwood mansion was unrecognizable. Not the structure, the stone walls still stood tall. The chandeliers still sparkled. The marble floors still gleamed. But the essence of the place had transformed completely. There was laughter now, real, genuine, joyful laughter that echoed through hallways once drowned in silence. Lily's crayon drawings covered the refrigerator door and spilled onto the kitchen walls. Dominic had refused to let anyone take them down. "They're masterpieces," he insisted with a straight face whenever Elena suggested organizing them into an album. Fresh flowers bloomed in every room, roses, lilies, sunflowers. Elena had planted a garden in the backyard, and Lily helped water it every morning, splashing more water on herself than on the plants. The forbidden room on the 3rd floor was no longer forbidden. Dominic had converted it into a playroom, filled with toys and books, and a small tent where Lily hosted tea parties for Mr. Honey and his growing collection of stuffed animal friends. The mansion had become a home. On this particular Sunday morning, chaos reigned in the kitchen. "More chocolate chips," Lily demanded, standing on a step stool beside the counter. She was 4 years old now, taller, louder, more opinionated than ever. "Dom, you promised." "I promised a few chocolate chips," Dominic replied, holding the bag out of reach. "You've already eaten half the bag." "That's not true. There's chocolate on your face, pequeña." Elena laughed, wiping Lily's cheek with a towel. "The evidence is clear." Lily pouted dramatically, then turned her most devastating puppy dog eyes toward Dominic. He lasted approximately 3 seconds. "Fine. A few more." He sprinkled chocolate chips into the pancake batter while Lily cheered triumphantly. "But this is the last time." Elena raised an eyebrow. "You said that last Sunday. And the Sunday before that," Marcus added from the doorway, a rare smile on his weathered face. He had stayed on as butler, though his role had shifted to something more like beloved family member than employee. Dominic shrugged helplessly. "She's very persuasive." They ate breakfast together at the kitchen table, not the massive dining room table that could seat 20. The kitchen table was smaller, cozier, covered with sticky syrup and scattered crayons. It was perfect. After breakfast, Dominic left the mansion alone. He drove to the cemetery on the outskirts of the city, carrying a bouquet of white roses and a folded piece of paper in his pocket. Isabella's grave was simple, a white marble headstone beneath an old oak tree. He had chosen this spot because she had always loved trees, always loved the way sunlight filtered through leaves. Dominic knelt before the headstone and placed the roses at its base. "Hey, Bella," he said softly. The wind rustled through the branches above, gentle as a whisper. "I brought you something." He unfolded the paper, one of Lily's drawings. A family portrait, drawn in bright crayon colors. 3 figures holding hands, a tall man with dark hair, a woman with a ponytail, and a small girl in the middle. "Lily made this. She wanted you to have it." Dominic placed the drawing beside the flowers. "She asks about you sometimes. I told her you're an angel now. She said she already knew that." He sat in silence for a moment, watching the sunlight dance across the marble. "I'm trying, Bella. I'm trying to be happy, like you wanted." His voice cracked slightly. "I found them, Elena and Lily. Or maybe they found me. I don't know anymore." He touched the headstone gently, his fingers tracing the letters of her name. "I'm learning to live again, learning to feel again. It's terrifying sometimes, but it's also beautiful." A butterfly landed on the roses, bright orange wings catching the light. Dominic smiled. "I love you, little sister. I always will. But I'm not going to let the grief destroy me anymore. I'm going to live, really live, the way you always wanted me to." He stood up slowly, watching the butterfly flutter away into the morning sky. "I found people to love, Bella, and I'm going to spend the rest of my life making sure they know it." The afternoon sun painted the garden in shades of gold and amber. Dominic sat on the porch swing, watching Lily chase butterflies through the flower beds. Her laughter rang out like tiny bells, pure and free, filling the air with a music he had once thought he would never hear again. Mr. Honey sat propped against a garden gnome, overseeing the adventures with his button eyes. Elena appeared beside him, carrying 2 cups of coffee. She handed one to Dominic and settled into the swing next to him, close enough that their shoulders touched. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. They simply watched Lily run and spin and dance among the flowers, her dark curls bouncing with every movement. "Can I ask you something?" Elena said finally. "Anything." She turned to look at him, her eyes searching his face. "Do you regret it?" "Everything. You gave up the power, the empire, the control. Do you ever wish you had chosen differently?" Dominic considered the question carefully. 6 months ago, he had walked away from everything he had spent 2 decades building. He had abandoned the throne of an empire, surrendered the fear and respect of thousands, released the iron grip he had held over Chicago's underworld. By any measure, he had lost everything. "And yet, I didn't give anything up," he said quietly. "I just chose what mattered more." Elena's hand found his, their fingers intertwining on the worn wood of the swing. "And what matters more?" Dominic watched Lily attempt a cartwheel and fail spectacularly, collapsing into a giggling heap on the grass. "This," he said simply. "Her. You. Waking up without dread, sleeping without nightmares, feeling something other than emptiness." He turned to face Elena, his eyes soft in a way that still surprised her sometimes. "Are you happy?" she asked, the question barely above a whisper. "For 6 years, I didn't know what happiness meant. I had forgotten the feeling existed." His thumb traced gentle circles on her hand. "Now I know. Now I remember." "Dom! Dom!" Lily came running toward them, her small fist closed around something precious. She scrambled up the porch steps and launched herself into Dominic's lap. "I caught a butterfly," she announced breathlessly. "A really pretty one, orange and black. That's amazing, Pequeña." But I let it go. Lily opened her hand, revealing nothing but a trace of golden pollen on her palm. "Mr. Honey said butterflies need to be free, so I said goodbye and let it fly away." Dominic's throat tightened. He wrapped his arms around Lily, pulling her close against his chest. His eyes burned, but he didn't fight it anymore. He had learned that tears weren't weakness, they were proof of feeling, proof of living. "You did the right thing," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You did exactly the right thing." Lily pulled back and looked at his face, noticing the moisture in his eyes. "Dom, why are you crying?" And for the first time in his life, Dominic could answer that question honestly. "Because I'm happy, sweetheart. Because I'm so happy." Lily smiled and snuggled against him, perfectly content. Elena rested her head on Dominic's shoulder, completing the circle. The 3 of them sat together on the porch swing as the sun began its slow descent toward the horizon. The garden glowed, the butterflies danced, and the mansion that had once been a tomb was now, finally, a home. Dominic Blackwood had been a monster. He had been the stone-cold, ruthless, untouchable. But a 3-year-old girl with a worn teddy bear had asked him a question that the entire underworld never dared to ask, and in that moment, everything changed. She had taught him what no amount of power or wealth or fear could ever provide. That sometimes healing begins with a single hug. That sometimes living again requires only a reason to love. And that sometimes the strongest thing a person can do is let themselves feel. So what did you think of this story? Every one of us carries wounds, some visible, some hidden deep within our hearts. Like Dominic, we sometimes build walls around ourselves, believing that feeling nothing is safer than feeling pain. But this story reminds us of a beautiful truth. It's never too late to change. It's never too late to open our hearts again. And sometimes, the most unexpected people, a child, a stranger, someone we never thought would matter, become the ones who save us. If this story touched your heart, please hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss our daily uploads. Give us a like if you enjoyed it, and share this video with someone who might need to hear this message today. We would love to hear from you. How did this story make you feel? Have you ever experienced a moment that changed everything, a person who helped you see life differently? Please share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. We read every single one, and your stories inspire us more than you know. Thank you so much for being here with us today. We wish you good health, happiness, and peace in every moment of your life. May you always find reasons to smile, and may you never forget that you are worthy of love. Goodbye for now, and we will see you in the next video. Take care of yourselves and each other.